Our next speaker, Kenna Carlsen, will share with us some important safety information. Kenna Carlsen is a senior research associate with the National Safety Council's Work to Zero initiative, specializing in the application of technology in the workplace, risk mitigation practices, and workplace violence prevention. Prior to joining the council, Kenna served as a research consultant for leading Fortune 500 retail organizations. We're exploring the role of technology in crime prevention, workplace safety, and security. Kenna holds a master's degree from the University of Florida and currently resides outside of Gainesville, Florida. Kenna, we appreciate you taking the flight to be here with us today and to share the information that you have. Please join us.
Thank you, TJ, and thank you to the NCCCO Foundation for having me today. As TJ said, my name is Kenna Carlsen, and I am a Senior Research Associate with the National Safety Council's Work to Zero initiative. And I'm here today to talk really briefly about our partnership with the Foundation, along with some educational tools and resources that we have been developing out in this area and within the crane industry. Before I get too deep into that, I want to take a step back and really quickly introduce who the heck Work to Zero is. So as I said, we are a program within the National Safety Council. We were established back in 2019 from a grant gifted by the McElhatton Foundation. And we are really focused on eliminating fatality risks through the use of technology. So what we believe is that there are life-saving technologies available on the market today that can help to eliminate or mitigate some of the top occupational hazards our workers are facing. And when we think about these technologies, a lot of these are very mainstream in our personal lives, right? So we think of things like smartwatches, drones, in-cab monitoring systems. We think about AI with the rise of ChatGPT. A lot of these technologies are very engrossed in our everyday lives, but we're not seeing the same adoption rates in the workplace. And there are a number of reasons for this. There are barriers to technology adoption. So what Work to Zero really seeks to do is to develop out these different tools and resources to help make innovation more accessible for employers. So on our website, you can find a suite of completely free tools and resources, things like white papers, webinars, case studies, reports, anything you can think of, through every step of the innovation journey. So if you are new to technology and interested in learning more, you can learn about these individual technologies and how they're being used. You can learn about making the business case, building return on investment, how to actually pilot and implement these technologies, and how to overcome some of those really common barriers. We have been partnered now with the NCCCO Foundation for well over a year, and we had a few really key goals with our partnership. The first thing we wanted to do was we wanted to develop out some data-driven tailored content specifically within the crane industry. I have crane operators written up here, but our resources are available for anyone within the crane industry, whether it is the operators themselves, site supervisors, riggers, signal people, anyone you can think of. But we were really looking to fill that gap, right? There's a ton of information on general construction, general mining, general manufacturing, but we wanted to dig in more to understand what risks those in the crane industry were facing, along with some of the technology solutions that are out there that can really help to eliminate or mitigate some of those risks. And all of this is hopefully to help drive a reduction in those injuries and fatalities that we're seeing. So I'll start by talking about some of the available resources, and then I'll talk a little bit about some of the work that we're doing. Last year, we worked on, actually it was this year, we released a survey report. So this is kind of where we started our work with the foundation. And we were really interested in identifying those top hazardous situations within the crane industry, identifying the causes and contributing factors to these injuries, and understanding perceptions of safety technology. So one area we were really interested in was how many employers are looking into these technologies, how many have heard of them, how many are currently using them. And we got our pool of survey respondents with the help of the foundation. So we ended up with over 2,100 respondents. And these individuals all have an active NCCCO certification and have used that certification in the past 24 months. So we wanted people who were actively and who had recently used their certification. I won't go too deep into the results. If you're interested in checking out that survey report, as I said, it's completely free on our website, nsc.org/work-to-zero, or you can just Google us and we'll pop up. But one area that we were really interested in was what exposures workers were facing. And what we found interesting was you'll see those first two are grayed out. And that's because those are systemic risk factors. So these are not inherent to the situation themselves, right? So when we think of heat stress or fatigue, those are contributing to injuries, but they may not necessarily be the cause of injury. In some cases with heat stress, of course, we're seeing things like heat stroke, heat cramps, and so on. But what's really important is that we are seeing that workers are very often being exposed to heat stress and fatigue, which we know can contribute to lack of coordination, a decrease in physical abilities, reduced decision-making abilities, cognitive impacts. So 75% of our respondents said that they were likely or very likely to be exposed to heat or heat illness, and 58% were likely or very likely to be exposed to fatigue, which we thought was a really interesting kind of starting point as we were looking at this. From there, we start to see some of the exposures that are not very surprising, right? We've got struck by falling object, equipment overturn or tipping, lightning strikes, and so on. So these were the top 8. We identified 16 in total. This is number 9 through 16. And these continue onward with things like being struck by a vehicle, crane collapse, electrocution, and so on. And you'll also see a couple more of those systemic risk factors, including being unfamiliar with site and surroundings and lack of proper training. So this really helped us to set the stage to understand what these hazards are and what we needed to focus on in terms of technology and the controls that are out there. In that same survey, we also asked the respondents how familiar they were with these different safety technologies. So in the survey itself, we asked about 9 technologies. I'll talk a little bit more about some of those individual techs in just a second. But what we found was that in general, technology use within the crane industry itself is relatively low compared to general industry. There is a lot of willingness to try technologies based off of those responses, but we just needed to put out more resources about what sorts of technologies are out there and how they can actually be used. But from this graph, you can see that wearable gas sensors were by and large the most often used technologies. This isn't surprising, they've been around for a while. This is followed by proximity sensors. And interestingly, we saw a lot of respondents who have heard about technologies being used in other organizations but haven't used them themselves. So what this tells me is that there's a lot of interest, there's a lot of conversation around technology, but trying to pilot and adopt these technologies is a bit slower going. But when we look at things like drones, wearable vital signs monitors, or robotics, we're seeing that a lot of people are hearing about these technologies being used, they're aware of them, but they have not used them themselves yet. So with this information, we then developed out a second white paper. So we have that survey report, and we also have available a technology white paper. So this really drills into the different technology solutions that are available. And again, we were interested in what's out there, what's being used, and most importantly, how people perceive these technologies. Are they using them? Are they relevant? What are some pros and cons of technology? What are barriers to adoption, and so on? So in that white paper, we identified 12 different technologies, all of which with the ability to control for some of those top hazards that we identified in that survey report. Some of these are very specific to the crane industry. We think of things like anti-two-block systems and load moment indicators. Those have very specific purposes and very specific applications. but we also identified some other technologies that can be used to control for some of these hazards. So some examples we have here, and I'll give some more specific case studies in just a moment. Things like augmented and virtual reality are starting to gain traction for training. Drones are, by and large, becoming very commonly used for things like visual inspections. We're seeing vital signs monitoring, a lot more interest in those sorts of wearable devices. And they have come a tremendous way in terms of what they are able to do. So some of these wearables can, of course, detect potential health problems, but they can also look at things like noise exposure, heat exposure, gas exposure. So they're becoming very, very sophisticated in what they're able to do. I won't go through all 12 of these, but if you are interested in learning more about those technologies, definitely recommend looking at that white paper. And also within that paper, we wanted to gather some case studies, right? That's my favorite part, is actually hearing about these technologies, seeing how they work, and seeing how employers are using these technologies in more unconventional ways than we might think. That's what I really like about both of these case studies that I'll talk about in a minute, is that the technologies themselves are very simple. I think a lot of times when we think of tech, myself included, I tend to think of things that are very digital, need to be connected, need a lot of infrastructure. But both of these technologies are relatively simple in how they are deployed, but they're both being used in really impactful ways. So the first case study that we did was with Garney Construction, and they were interested in tackling their operators operating in the blind, right? So traditionally, and to this day, they relied on signal people to help communicate with the operator. But what they were finding was that this was increasing their serious incident and fatality risks because they were noticing a delay between communication and operator response. So they wanted something that would be able to facilitate that signal person or that spotter and to really help the operator gain confidence in what they were doing. So in order to do this, they began trialing the hoist cam system. Some of you may be familiar. You can see from this photo, the hoist cam system is a relatively simple technology. It is a fairly rugged wireless camera system that can be attached to a piece of equipment through magnets. In this case, it was on the crane block. And they use this camera system so that the operator themselves could visualize the site around them, right? They could see the lift, they could see the site, they could see workers who are in the surrounding area. And when they were evaluating for this, what I think is really interesting is a lot of times when we're looking at evaluation, we'll see things like operational improvements, cost savings, safety improvements. But what they were really interested in was feedback from the crane operators themselves. So it was largely qualitative, and they wanted to know from the operators, does this improve your job? Does it hinder you in any way? Does it make your job harder in any way? Oftentimes with these technologies, we can find that there are some barriers and roadblocks along the way. But based off of what the feedback that they received from the operators, the outcome was extremely positive. So of course it helped to enhance the enhanced work site and load visibility. So the operators did report that they were able to visualize the site better, they were able to see workers, they were able to evaluate where the load was, where it needed to go. And this helped to not only improve their awareness, but they talked a lot about how it reduced that mental load, right? So we know that when your job is mentally taxing, it can contribute to fatigue. Fatigue can contribute to injuries. So it helped to reduce that mental load. And they also talked a lot about feeling more confident in what they were doing. With all technology and with building an ROI, we cannot get away from the operational or productivity improvements as well. So they talked a lot about how it helped to increase their speed and their accuracy in their movements. In our second case study, we talked with Huddleston Crane Service, and they are a small business out of California. And they were really controlling for some hazards that they were experiencing with their site inspections, particularly around work at height and when they were inspecting the terrain itself related to surface expressions. So they found that they were exposing their workers to these risks, And back in 2009, they had a project that required them to do some inspection at heights, and they gave drones a try. So they deployed this drone, and what they were able to do was to take high quality photos and videos of the work site. And what this enables them to do, and they're still using drones to this day, continue to upgrade them as they keep coming out with new and improved models. But what they told us was that it not only minimized worker exposure to those hazards, but it really helped to improve their site inspections overall. So they were finding that their lift plans were more precise, they had better images to base their planning off of, it could facilitate their emergency response planning as well. And they were using these drone photos as sort of progress reports for their clientele as well. We also see improved operational efficiency and time and cost savings. They gave one example where they were tasked with inspecting 300 of these large water tanks. Initially, before the drones, it would have taken them over a year. With the drone, it took them just 8 days. So they saw some huge operational efficiency boosts from these drones and continue to use them and advocate for them to this day. We also have some upcoming projects. I will also add, we are always interested in case studies. If you are using any technology, we're always interested in hearing about it. Success stories and failures are hugely important for our learnings. So if you have any, feel free to share them with me. Upcoming, we have an online tool, and this is going to be an interactive tool for workers specifically within the crane industry who can identify whatever hazards they are interested in. So we are relying on that list of the 16 top hazards from our survey. And what users will be able to do is identify whichever hazardous situations they're most interested in learning about, and it will take them to a page where they can learn more about the existing controls based off of the hierarchy of controls that they can implement in their business. These are anything from how to eliminate or substitute to administrative, engineering, and PPE controls. Of course, we will also be focusing on those specific technologies. So the tool will talk a lot about those technologies, training efforts, and other controls that can help to mitigate some of those risks. As you heard from Scott Ketchum, with the increased focus on heat stress, we are also increasing our focus there as well. So we are also developing out a heat stress brief. Again, this is going to be very specific to the crane industry. We're really trying to fill that gap of knowledge within that very specific industry. So we will, again, rely on that hierarchy of controls to identify and rank potential solutions or controls related to heat stress. So this will be anything from administrative controls you can put in place to the different technologies that are out there to reduce those risks. But that is it from me. TJ, I will give it back to you.
Thank you very much, Kenna.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kenna. Appreciate you sharing that information. Again, we've really enjoyed, the foundation's really enjoyed our partnership with you and the NSC and helping us develop all those white papers. We'll also say the white papers and the research that Kenna highlighted in the beginning that's already out there. It's also available on the foundation, NCCCO foundation.org websites. You can access it there as well. And then as she said, a couple of the new the information around heat stress will hopefully be out later this year, and then the online tool that we're developing right now. So that'll all be announced in the next month or two, again, as part of the partnership that we're doing with the NSC. So we're really enjoyed working with you and appreciate all the resources you're providing the industry to help us be safer.